What's going on, guys? ShadowNinja here, and today we are revisiting one of my favorite builds I've ever done, and that includes Actium War Rig. Now, the reason why I am revisiting this, well, someone 8 days ago gave me an idea, and Wolfing Viking 4692, thank you. Yeah, we're revisiting this in Season of the Witch. This original build video was released in Season of the Defiance, so certainly things have changed in terms of the subclass, the sandbox, certain exotics got a few tweaks, and then on top of that, instead of doing a void version, we're going to be doing a solar version because I kept the promise to myself of utilizing solar in different ways and finally dipping my toes into solar. This is a subclass, like I said before in other videos. For some reason, I have never really gave a damn about this, and it's been by far my least used subclass in the history of Destiny 2. But this season, things have been changing. I've been a solar boy, and here we are making another solar build video. Now, for one, the exotic of choice armor-wise, no surprise, I mentioned it before, the Actium War Rig. Now, what's so awesome about this exotic, if you guys don't know, is that it steadily reloads your equipped auto rifles or machine guns magazine over a period of time. So it allows you to continuously lay down fire at your opponent, and if you are lucky enough when it comes to certain perks like 4 times a charm, you can shoot a ton of bullets at your enemies and do a lot of damage in most activities. Now, bosses are a little bit different, but altogether, this is a solid exotic, especially for some of those exotic primaries. Now, the exotic primary of choice, since we're doing solar, and it's one of my favorite exotic primaries right now with the solar subclass, Tommy's Matchbook. Now, if you guys don't know, Tommy's Matchbook, Ignition Trigger is the intrinsic trait, and sustained fire with this weapon overheats it, increasing damage, but burning the user. So, as you can imagine, we're doing damage to ourselves, but the solar subclass and what we have set up, honestly, we're pretty much always going to be alive, and in my opinion, I remember using L'Oreal a little bit when it came to this. This is arguably better than L'Oreal. Maybe not as bizarre or cheesy, but this is a lot more consistent, and honestly, this is a L'Oreal replacement. L'Oreal's still good, but it got nerfed, so it's not as effective as it once was. Now, besides that, this intrinsic trait, we have the weapon perk Heat Sink, so overheat damage is reduced while not aiming down sights. While overheated, sustained fire scorches your target. And we have the Catalyst, which basically, while Ignition Trigger is active, your health recovers much faster. So survivability with the Catalyst on is definitely there, as well as some few other things. But yeah, that is the main setup here. And the reason why we're using Tommy's Matchbook is that we're scorching, we're causing ignitions, we're exploding, and some of the subclass allows us to have restoration and be radiant, and with certain fragments, we always have those 2 buffs procced, and it is absolutely insane. You're scorching targets because War Rig is allowing you to dive deep into those reserves, which is infinite in this case, and you will mainly not have to reload in most situations. Every now and then you just shoot too much, and yeah, you gotta reload, but if you hold down the trigger and you keep on firing, you will be applying scorch, doing ignitions, and laying down very dense ad areas, which is where this build shines the most. Now, if the area isn't as dense with ads and it's kind of an old activity that wasn't before some of the changes they did to building out enemy density, then yeah, this isn't going to be as effective and maybe a bit overkill. But if you're doing Ghost of the Deep, any raid with a lot of ads, any strike and Vanguard activities with a lot of ads, this build will shine in ways that you were like, man, what have I been doing? This is incredible. So with that all being said, let's jump into Destiny and then showcase the build on hand and get into details with all the other stuff that you need to know. So before we continue, as a rule, let's appreciate the drip. I am pretty damn happy with this look. Now, for the most part, it's kind of similar to the look I had before, but we changed up the helmet and I think the legs, I'm not really sure. And yeah, I just love it. It looks awesome. So for one, let's talk about the solar subclass here. And that is, we're using Throwing Hammer, which is kind of a no-brainer. Now, the reason why I want to use this instead of like other melees is because one, it's just really good, and we're using Soul Invictus. So you'll be seeing Soul Invictus is important to getting restoration, and we need that to get really a lot out of it, and just can always have it, you know, the simple stuff, nothing too complicated. Now, for grenades, this is a preference. If you're doing endgame activities, I recommend a healing grenade because, again, sometimes you may struggle to get sunspots based on what's shooting at you, and healing grenades are a great way to get restoration and then maintain it after a period of time. Some of the other mods will definitely get this healing grenade back, but this is a good option. But if you guys are comfortable enough and don't need a healing grenade, fusion grenade is a great secondary option. Now for our aspect, Solar Victus is the big one here. So the reason why that is Solar ability Final Blows, which is our throwing hammer, and defeating scorched targets, which is because of our Tommy's Matchbook, creates a sunspot. Now once you are in that sunspot, you get restoration. And this is pretty important to staying alive. Now on top of that, we're using Roaring Flames. Now Final Blows with solar abilities or ignitions increase the damage of your solar abilities to stacks 3 times. So this is a great way to just benefit more from the hammer and potentially your grenades if you're using a fusion grenade. But altogether, this is kind of the go-to aspect if you're not going to use Consecration. No reason to use Consecration in this case, so Roaring Flames is there by default. Now for our fragments, really important, Ember of Empyrean. So solar weapon or ability Final Blows extend the duration of restoration and radiant effects applied to you. So as you can tell, when it comes to our restoration, this will extend if we're using a solar weapon, which we are, which is Tommy's Matchbook, and we are always shooting it, so we will be always at the max duration cap for restoration, and we will not be doing damage to us because restoration while we shoot Tommy's Matchbook is going to be healing us. This thing is incredible. And then the extension of Radiant, you'll see we're using the fragment for Radiant, and yeah, you're just a walking tank that's indestructible, a walking solar tank, if I may say. Next to that, we're using Ember of Ashes. You apply more scorch stacks to targets. This is great if you guys feel comfortable switching it. You can. I don't really recommend it because we're using a scorching weapon. But yeah, altogether, this is a great fragment. Now, next to that, Ember of Torches is a no-brainer. Powered melee attacks against combatants make you and nearby allies radiant. This will increase our power and increase damage collectively to combatants. So yeah, this is an incredible no-brainer fragment that's kind of always there in most builds. And next to that, guys, Ember of Solace. Now, potentially, you can switch off this, but for the most part, this increases the effects of your Radiant and Restoration. Maybe you switch this one off, maybe you don't. It depends how comfortable you are and how viable you feel like you can get the Radiant and Restoration stuff to re-kick. But again, this is more of a training wheels type of fragment than a crutch fragment in my opinion. But altogether, that's the solar subclass. Now for our mods, this is semi-important. You'll be seeing when it comes to the grenade why it is important. For our helmet, we're using 2 solar siphons to just increase the generation of orbs. Picking up these orbs will grant us armor charges. Really important for our grenade kickstart. So since we have, in this case, 5 armor charges, we will be getting our healing grenade back very frequently, or other grenade depending on what you're using. We're also using solar loader. God forbid I do have to reload, which is pretty rare. Now underneath that, we're using 2 charge ups. Now the base armor charge cap is 3. This will get us to 5. Is this a bit overkill? Yes. In certain activities like raids, if you guys are using a rocket launcher and you need more rockets for that deep DPS phase, you can switch off to solar reserves. That is perfectly fine, or any of the reserves in that case. I use Apex Predator, which is solar. I'll use solar reserves, but whatever your personal preference is, be my guest. Now, underneath that, with legs, we have 2 weapon surges. Is this overkill? Does it stack? I don't think it stacks with Radiant, but at the same time, there's kind of no better option for legs. So here we are, double dipping with surges just for no particular reason. And then when it comes to the marks, we have time dilation to extend our armor charges decay. This is just precautionary. I don't really think you'll need it too much, especially if you're generating so many orbs or you're using your grenade kickstart mod very effectively. But altogether, this is a very solid selection of mods. Feel free to change what you think is necessary for your own personal playstyle. And finally, for our seasonal artifact, the main 2 that are really important to this build, Monochromatic Maestro, because dealing elemental ability damage increases matching weapon damage, and elemental weapon damage increases matching ability damage. Bonus granted is 10% for 5 seconds. Again, this is a no-brainer. This is a must-have on. Everything else is kind of subjective. And then if you guys want to utilize elemental orbs, you can use solar ones. This is awesome. I like them. They also apply Scorch when the solar explosion happens. So yeah, there's the benefits to this entirely. But altogether, nothing too crazy about that artifact. Now let's jump out of here and give you my closing thoughts on this build. Now, like I said before, this build is great in most activities, Grandmaster and Master not included, because I can see where survivability still may be on the harder side because, yeah, those dudes deal some significant damage. But altogether in most activities, like you see in this gameplay, this thing will lay down the hammer against anyone against all the ads. It's even fun in certain boss encounters in a dungeon or a raid. I was using this there. If you guys are stuck on ad clear, throw this build on and they will always put you on ad clear because you'll make their lives so much easier. Unfortunately, this build does require Tommy's matchbook, which is an exotic not everybody has, but if you guys do have it or can afford it when it comes to the vault, where you can get some of these forgotten or archived exotics, then do it. It is a great exotic. It's one of my favorites, and an important fact to mention that Dado has probably explained and you've seen and has ruined the game for me. Exotic primaries are kind of the way to go. There is absolutely no reason not to use one. There are other great high boss DPS options that aren't exotics in Destiny 2 right now. So exotics are pretty much mainly primary weapons, and it makes sense to do that. There is a great buff when it comes to 40% against combatants, and then for auto rifles, they got a 25% last season. So this kicks. This has punch, and this is incredible. So besides that, I do expect myself to revisit this build again before the season concludes. I have an idea which strand or another subclass, kind of not sure. So if you guys are interested in that, definitely be sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell to be notified if you guys aren't subscribed to the channel. But that's pretty much all I got in this one. If you guys enjoyed and found this video informative, definitely be sure to drop this video a like, helps with the video a ton. But besides that, I hope you guys have a good one. ShadowNinja here, and I'm out.